were
An
mixed.
ounce, while silver is at $22.13.
Overnight, we
Iron
saw
ore
that China kept its
132.50.
loan prime rate.
Steel, of course, we have a minister
All prices fell in early trade this Monday as
development. The steel is trading for that
oil
price, as you can see,
at
around the screen. What else do we have? Is that all? Okay, commodities, agricultural commodities, palm oil, wheat, cocoa, sugar. Apart from cocoa and sugar that are trading in the green, palm oil as well as wheat,
metals. Gold is trading at
2022. All right, that's it
for
an ounce, while silver is at $22.13.
For now,
iron ore
because it
132.50.
is actually a very
Steel,
dynamic
of course,
market.
we have a minister.
We will go on a break
steel
very quickly,
development.
but before we go on
The steel
a break,
is
you can connect
trading
with us
on
these
you can see,
platforms as you
on
can
the
see on
screen.
the
What
screen.
else do we have?
Facebook,
Is that
Moneyline,
all?
Nancy.
Okay. You can send us a WhatsApp on this number 0814-833-9088, where you can ask your questions as well as drop your comments on Instagram, on Threads, on LinkedIn, on X, as well as on Threads. So we are all there. So connect with us. Let's quickly take a break, and when we come back, I will be having an interview with the Presidential Advisor on Economic Affairs. That's the Special Advisor to the President on Economic Affairs, Dr. Tokpe Fasho. We will be looking at addressing Nigeria's macroeconomic challenges. It's a myriad of challenges. How is this government poised to face that challenge? We will be right back after the break. To join us again. Program. Dr. Tokwe Fashua joins me now. He's the special advisor on economic affairs to Mr. President, that's President Bola Tinubu. Welcome to you, Dr. Fashua.
Thank you very much. Good morning. It's good to be here.
Good morning. This is the first interview with you as special advisor, yes.
Interesting, yeah.
Interesting, isn't it?
Right, exactly.
How has the role been for you? How is it now sitting on my chair with a different designation?
Well, it doesn't feel that different because I don't think I've changed, you get me? I'm still...
I don't think you've changed in what
very much
area?
In terms of thinking, you know.
Okay.
Of course, we find that, of course, getting to know the challenges in government, the nuances, the difference between the perception out there and what goes on inside. But all of that are just ingredients to make us think deeper and to also remind ourselves of the promises we made and the need to fulfill those promises. So, again, it's good to be here. It's challenging, but I think, if you ask me, I think we'll pick up momentum this year, 2024. The right things have been done. The critical issues have been tackled. Bitter pills have been swallowed. So I think we should be looking forward to something good for the people this year and going forward.
What do you think is different in your role now? Because as a private sector person, and these are issues you've been talking about for a very long time, now you find yourself within the corridors of power, you find yourself having the ears of Mr. President, you find yourself dealing with people on a regular basis, the managers of the economy. What is different? Because they always say that for those of us that sit outside, it's a bit different. I know, I've known you for years, for about 2 decades now. You know, so how is it? Because they were like, oh, those of us outside, we don't know what's in the happen. In fact, there was a time, I think the presidential advisor at the time said that there are witches and wizards in that, in that Aso Rock. You know, so they are, that we don't see, that it's not the same. So speak to me.
He has to explain what it means. But I think one critical difference is that the President Tinubu's government is a lot closer to the people than some other governments have seen in these last 2-3 decades. And I say that with all sense of responsibility. I was looking at the instances where he has had to reverse himself, you know, and reverse policy, you know, without a shame. And he will say to you that, look, we're not ashamed of making, if we make mistakes, we're not ashamed of correcting ourselves, you know, because nobody knows it all. And I think that's what makes a difference. So it's very much close to the reality of what the people are thinking. Of course, there are some key policies he has stood by and said, look, I'm not going to change on this, except I'm absolutely convinced. But in matters of maybe you make an appointment, it's not quite the appointment, like there was that case of a certain gentleman who was appointed as a chairman of Paracetamol. He reversed it, you know, like the case of, you know, cost of governance.
Well, I don't even want us to go there because that's not the issue. But if you say he reverses it, if you say he reverses it, don't you think that it also shows that perhaps it's not really
I mean,
on the matter that perhaps he's having appendages?
Government is a behemoth, okay? So there's so many things going on. When I look at the executives sitting on top of the pack, I mean, how many things will they know in detail, really? So a lot depends on those of us who are their aides, honestly. A lot depends on us. And if we don't back them up very well or we don't advise properly, then, of course, mistakes will be made. But when they discover mistakes are made, do they hang on to that mistake and hang on to their guns and say, well, let everybody go to blazes? I think that's where the difference is. For example, we were talking about the reduction in the cost of governance and the number of people traveling. I mean, Davos just ended. The vice president went with only 5 people. 5 people, including security and everything. Even I couldn't make the cut. You know, so I was right here, you know, but I was thankful because I'm not a fan of that much cold anyway. But that tells you a story because we're seeing a scenario where the government is ready to do the right thing by the people. And I think we're going to see an acceleration of such instances and such decisions. When people complain, then the government sits up and say, okay, you know what, we can make it better. Mind you, we run a presidential democracy. The executive is different from the legislature, different from the judiciary. Those ones have a mind of their own. The executive cannot command the legislature or the judiciary what to do. So the executive can only take care of his own corner. So in terms of, but I think that we are going to be seeing a lot more governance that aligns with what the people want. And I think that's my joy in serving in this government. Of course, one is a bit closer to governance now, knowing some of the illusions, you know, that can be felt by the public, you know, like just imagining that everybody in government is enjoying and all of that. It's not like that. Oftentimes, a lot of people are in government making huge sacrifices, delayed salaries or no salaries at all, you know, no opportunities of office. So it's a case of sacrificing. For those who want to serve, you must be ready to sacrifice and give your all to the cause of the people. And I think that's what it's about.
You know, when I take a look at the global economy right now, I think the global economy has really gone crazy on macroeconomics, you know, in terms of inflation, GDP growth, unemployment, and all of that. I want to ask you this question from the vantage position where you are right now. How do you think that geopolitics is impacting Nigeria's is impacting the stability of Nigeria's macroeconomic environment? And I asked that question on the basis of, okay, we're recovering, perhaps we've recovered from 2022 pandemic, even though there are still fragments around, you know, Ukraine, Russian war, then now what's happening in Gaza, over 25,000 people killed, and what have you, with a lot of climate issues and what have you. So how does it really fit in? Is Nigeria's macroeconomic environment really suffering from geopolitics that's more, or the internal issues that we've had for about 10 years now?
Well, it depends on what you're looking at, but again, are we really suffering from geopolitics? I'll say not quite, you know, because the war in Ukraine and Russia led to a spike in the price of crude oil, which favors us, even though we know what our challenges are. I remember the former Minister for Petroleum for State saying that if crude oil got to $100, Nigeria will suffer. I think we've been able to get around that, to say that if the price of crude oil goes up, yes, we have a challenge with higher prices of petrol locally, but again, long term, we're going to be getting more money coming in from crude oil sales. And I think that's a decision the president took on the day he was being inaugurated in terms of subsidy. Because before, what he meant was if the price of crude oil went up, we'll be accruing so much in terms of subsidies which are being swept under one account or the other in NNPC. But now it's no longer the case, per se, at least to a certain large extent, you know. So all of these things are happening. Of course, the global challenge of climate is also there. There's an agenda on climate, but like the former vice president would say, and which was also been echoed by President Tinubu, we cannot make a trade-off in terms of our development and climate. So we say if climate is going to make us develop slower or grow slower, we have to find a way around that, because we are an economy, we're a growing economy, a developing economy. We need to grow. Our people need to be taken out of poverty. To a large extent, we need to build infrastructure and what have you. In fact, I was reading a report a couple of days back that some people put up somewhere abroad, and they said that the fact that African countries are growing rice, and especially Nigeria is now growing a lot more, is leading to climate emissions, some sort of emissions. And so you'd ask us, should we stop growing rice? They probably have noticed. That means that the efforts that have been put into rice production have hit the radar internationally. At least we're putting quite a bit of efforts into that. Of course, we're not going to slow down on that. They need to come and meet us at the table, because they're the ones that have contributed more to the climate woes that we're seeing on today. So if we're just talking about things like growing rice, like growing wheat, trying to reduce the $5 billion odd that we spend buying wheat on a yearly basis, those are very big, basic issues that we shouldn't actually shift for anybody, but it's because for us it's a matter of survival. So to a large extent, I would say that the few things that we need to do, most of it in terms of moving the furniture around, is actually local to us, the domestic issues we need to deal with while we're navigating the international politics and geopolitics that surround all these issues.
Now, let's take a look at, I really want to know how worried Mr. President is concerning Nigeria's macroeconomic challenges. How worried is he? When you guys have conversations with him, if that happens, what are the sound bites that Mr. President comes out with in the space that we are not all privy to?
Well,
yes, because at the end of the day, some people may begin to wonder that if the government, and when I mean the government, I mean the central and even the state government, are in tune with what is happening with the rest of us. For example, we have about 20 million urban poor people. We have about 184 million rural poor people. That's a lot. 104 million Nigerians living in poverty. 63% of us are living in multidimensional poverty. So I really want to know what's going inside President Tinubu's mind when he's speaking to those he has appointed, aides like you and perhaps his ministers and all of that.
Let me just say that there's one thing that sets the president apart, and he's a very, very incredibly difficult person to bet against. You can't bet against Bola Tinubu. After all said and done, and he will say to us, and even of course openly, I must succeed. I will succeed. So whatever it takes, and of course you're going to be seeing, when necessary, changes. Tectonic changes that will be pointing in that line of success for what he has promised to the country, because he's not here to be a failure of a president. Of course, many presidents have come and gone in Nigeria, and promises have been made only not to be fulfilled. We've only spent maybe 6, 7, 8 months down the line, and there's a lot of space for us to actually still achieve what we want. So as it is right now, the president is someone who is absolutely positive and never say never, never say die person, who also has the interest of the people at heart. At the end of the day, the key reason I actually supported President Tinubu from get-go is because he's a bit left of center. He's someone that thinks in terms of the people, the well-being of the people. He thinks about these, especially those poor people you mentioned, what can we do for them? However, it's also down to growing productivity to ensure that people are well engaged and all of that, and are earning money themselves more than just giving people handouts and so on. And of course, you saw his actions regarding when we saw the problems with the cash transfer program. He was very swift in taking decisions to say, you know what, let us even review this whole thing. What is it all about? Is it really working? Mind you, the fact that the same World Bank that brought out the 104 million poor people are the same ones who proposed the idea of giving cash transfers, which I believe to a certain extent we need to actually really review. Are we due for that? Or should we be teaching our people how to fish rather than giving them fish? Should we be creating opportunities for employment, for engagement?
But Dr. Fashua, you know that this example has also been practiced in other climes, and they were successful. Yes. No.
For example,
Bolsa Familia in Brazil.
You know what Brazil has gone on to do?
I know what they did.
Now, Brazil is a country that produces its own aeroplanes, its own cars, okay, massively, and it's one of the countries that will grow the fastest in 2024, according to the same IMF and World Bank. That tells you the sophistication of the Brazilian economy.
But if you look at how I'm talking about their social protection.
So yes, social protection is good.
How they did their social protection.
There's a cultural aspect to social protection. Do you know already that Nigeria has what they call social capital? And social capital is measured by, if they drop you in a town or city, how much longer can you survive without having your own cash? We're saying that families back up themselves in Nigeria. People,
but it's shrinking now. It's shrinking because even the families, they don't have money to back now.
Excuse me, but it's shrinking, but it's still there, and it is embedded in our culture. Both of us sitting down here, I reckon that we have families in the village that we send money to on a monthly basis. So if we are going to buy some of those things from abroad, we need to actually consider our own social psychology before saying, because it worked in Brazil or it worked elsewhere, it will always work in Nigeria. If we have opportunity, like I said, Brazil had developed to a certain extent and had developed to the point of becoming an industrialized country, even when that was happening, the Bossa Familia. So we cannot leave the development of our industries
about the same model that has happened like in India, is it Bangladesh and in some other Southeast
microfinance? We brought it here.
Yes, I know.
Well, of course, you know the problem of microfinance. So again, microfinance kind of turned around Bangladesh to a certain extent, helped in India, but then again, of course, over time they also realized that maybe the issue is really not local microfinancing of farmers, okay, but a much more nuanced, macro level development, which is where India is tending to. So you probably will say that India is getting a lot more from remittances from abroad, okay, than that idea of giving finance to small farmers to do small things and all of that. So a lot needs to be rearranged, actually, and I think that's where we're tending towards in Nigeria now. A lot needs to be rearranged in terms of what is our vision. You see, do we want to remain small with small companies, which most of our companies are companies that, import equipment from abroad to produce locally here, or to add value to whatever is coming from abroad, or to do some packaging. Now it's a time that we're thinking in terms of what can we do fundamentally to get our own industrialization going so that we can actually begin to sit with countries, at that level, at that table where decisions are being made for the future.
Now, let's disintegrate inflation a bit. And, of course, one of the macroeconomic indicators, we've seen that inflation has risen to over close to a three-decade high. That's close to 30 years, close to the highest in 30 years. If you also take a look at the different dimensions of inflation, and I know definitely you're an economist, so you understand what I mean. You take a look at the sachetization that has happened in Nigeria in the last few years. Every big product now has a sachet version. You take a look at shrinkflation, whereby the product has reduced. You take a look at even skimpflation, whereby the quality of products have also reduced. I received a hamper over the weekend, and when I was unraveling the hamper, this custard, the big bucket of custard, the product inside was not even up to a quarter, and it was as big as this. That is shrinkflation for you, so for my audience to understand. So how do you really take a look at these dimensions of inflation? Ab initio, even the headline inflation hitting us, and how do you think that, what policy propositions do you think that we should use to address this inflation that has become very stubborn? I know that Yemi Cardoso, they came up with a calendar for MPC. The first MPC tentatively also were told that to be held in February. So how do you think that inflation should be addressed, having been exacerbated by higher energy costs as well as high food costs, with also transport? So dimension all this for me.
I think just last week I was discussing this very interesting concept of shrinkflation, skimpflation, profit-driven inflation, and all these other new types of inflation that we actually never really reckoned with in Nigeria. And I think it takes me back to my last point in terms of the kind of structure that needs to be built for us to now begin to do the right thing in our country. So here we are. If we look at inflation, our interaction with inflation right now has been that we're all price takers. So the MBS goes out there every month to go and get the prices of goods and services, and then reports that this is what's going on. And then we wait until the next month to do the same thing. That's not good enough. Whereas the central bank the central banks around the world have been designated, so to speak, to be the custodians of inflation and those responsible for driving down inflation or maintaining a price level at a certain point. The point is that central banks alone cannot do it. When you talk about shrinkflation, which has always happened in Nigeria over a long period of time, that producers of especially fast-moving consumer goods will reduce the volume of what they sell and sell at the same price. Now, that's not a question for central bank to deal with. The central bank may not be able to have the capacity to deal with that.
So
who
should
will
it be
deal with
FCCPC?
Well,
Standard
FCCPC can
organization?
do that. Standard organization may be able to do that. But we need a different kind of thinking around that. I mean, if you have to go inside, for example, we saw a scenario where someone took a video of these boys in the market who were leaking out maybe small cans of paint, or even, let's call it mudu, of rice from the 50 kg one. And they're going to sell that rice to you at 50 kg. Who's checking to ensure that a rice of 50 kg that you buy in the market is actually 50 kg and not 40 kg? Because if it was 40 kg, you have to then go back to buy when you should not have gone to buy. That is inflation, In France, Carrefour, which is the second largest supermarket in France, actually took notice of that. There was a product, the Lipton iced tea, which is actually owned by Pepsi Cola. They reduced the volume, and they were selling at the same price. And a company as capitalist as Carrefour went and put a sign on that aisle to say that these products are suffering from shrinkflation, and that going forward they would actually stop stocking those products from Pepsi, which sent Pepsi into a flap. So standard organization, yes, they would need a huge amount of footwork in terms of field workers to go into the markets to ensure that we're not being cheated. Our reaction to inflation, again, in Nigeria, is a country where if you increase the price of fuel by 20%, transport costs will probably go up by 50%. And this has always been the case. So before we begin to buy those foreign concepts and open textbooks of economics and say this is what our problem is as written down, we need to understand either we're updating our knowledge in terms of new concepts that have been noticed by researchers abroad, or we're looking what to say, how do we react to things, what is our
inflation and sensitization is not, they are not new concepts in Nigeria.
They're not entirely.
It's been a response to prices going higher in Nigeria for many years now.
That's what I'm saying. How many times has it been discussed? How many times have you discussed it on your own show?
I'm trying to discuss it.
Exactly. So what we mean then is that, they are not entirely very new concepts, but they're also new concepts or in terms of thinking. And in fact, we don't have to wait for foreigners to discover these things for us. We need to understand it ourselves and move against it. If these concepts hadn't hit the radar, and in fact, those are one of the reasons, some of the reasons why the United States, European Union, United Kingdom, and those very powerful countries have been able to drag down their inflation from double digits to where they are today, 3.7%, 3.9%, 4% here. They've been able to move down from where it was like a year ago to where it is. If a Nigerian had proposed that idea, somebody would have said, oh, this is unorthodox. What do you mean? Do you want to start controlling prices? We're not controlling prices. We're just saying that we need to protect our people. There's what's called seller's inflation, which I may have discussed here before. But seller's inflation is all where this is, that we realize that manufacturers, producers, distributors, wholesalers, and even retailers have been able to increase the cost of their wares, their products, by passing on the increased cost of production and selling to the final consumer plus a profit. So that is again where profit-driven inflation comes from. Corporates will have meetings and their board and shareholders and set profit targets and say, this is the profit target we want to meet. However you get it, we don't care. And so the final consumer is suffering. Equally, even when you talk about food inflation, which you mentioned earlier on, how does it occur? Is it that our farmers are getting a lot more money for their products? No, they are not. So there are wholesalers, there are distributors, there are middlemen in between that actually buy in bulk. Remember that the last administration actually tried to put in place something called a policy in terms of how much can be bought at the farm gates from farmers, to say wholesalers, many of them foreigners, cannot just go to the farm gate and say, you know what, let me buy everything you have produced this year for 500,000. 500,000 can be a lot of money to the local, very local farmer, okay? But the point is maybe they're cheating that guy. Maybe they should be buying at 3 times the cost. And by the time these same people move it to the consumers, the price of all of these food items are very expensive. And of course, the farmer is not getting the benefit. The consumers are suffering. What this means at the end of the day is that we need a whole new infrastructure which hasn't been built. A whole new infrastructure. And that the challenge of inflation management and reduction is not for the central bank alone. It's not even for the Standard Organization or FCCPC alone. It's for everybody. If Carrefour, a company, okay, massive company, resident in France, could have done what they did, and in fact, not only Carrefour, there's another company called Netto in Germany. Another is also a supermarket, which did the same thing for different other products to say there's shrinkflation. We think that this company is cheating our customers, and because of that, we'll stop stocking them. And so we can't be more capitalist than those countries. We should actually start to really pity ourselves and pity the final consumers in Nigeria to say that everybody has to have their hands on deck towards reducing inflation. Sellers inflation is real, shrinkflation is real, sachetization is also real, because if you can bring out, let's say in a tin of beverage, you can bring out so many sachets, and you're selling sachets and you're actually adding, but they find out that it actually works for them. It gives them more profit to sell by the sachets, and of course it also mirrors the increasing poverty in the land.
Yeah.
That people are now rather opting for sachets and all of that. But all of these, we need that big discussion, and I've always said this. When we have our big arguments and our big symposia around economics, these issues that are almost micro in nature, they never get discussed. We talk about the huge debt issue, we talk about investment coming from abroad, but who is thinking for the common man? Who is helping the common man? How are we discussing about the small economy of our people, which is where almost all of us are? We're still largely an informal economy, if you like.
And that is what I try to discuss here every day on the program to establish that nexus between the big guys and the small guys, as it were, and looking at the microeconomics. Now, let's take a look at the GDP growth, which is also one indicator for macroeconomics. If you take a look at it in the last few years, okay, if I look at even last year, 2023, President Buhari set an expectation of 3.75%. I think we ended up at about 3.1%. We had 2 recessions in his government. I used to say that the last 8 years was really a pure economic disaster for us, and it will take us like 25 years to get back to like 2013 levels for Nigeria. But I don't know what you think about that in terms of how do we achieve a stable economic growth? Bearing in mind that productivity is low, there's a Japa syndrome right now. Nigeria is an agrarian society. Insecurity is a huge risk there, even though that in the past 10 years or so, we've also seen, or even more than that, since Jonathan days actually, we've seen a higher spending allocated to insecurity, to defense, as it were. I think we have about 12% higher defense spending this year. So how would you put all of that together? And President Tinubu wants to achieve a $1 trillion economy. I don't know how he's going to achieve that with insecurity. There's insecurity right now in Abuja. Thankful that the family have actually recovered their 5 girls and all of that. So much really to chew.
Insecurity is a clear and present danger, no doubt about that. It's terrible. However, I think our response to insecurity too needs to be managed. I was telling someone, do you know that the United States may be statistically a more dangerous country than Nigeria? I mean, just today I was seeing that 215 people were found to have been buried behind a jail in somewhere in Mississippi. And these are people who just disappeared, from the society. 30,000 people, odd 30,000 people get killed by gun violence. But would you see an American come to TV, for example, on social media and say, this country is the most useless country, we need to disintegrate this country, it's not going anywhere, it's the worst country in the world? If countries didn't suffer insecurity, there won't be any need for government. In fact, if we go back to Thomas Hobbes and the whole idea of people coming together as society, it was because of security. However, security may not no country that has a perfect system. Even in countries like Switzerland, Liechtenstein, and all of those countries that are small, reputed to be secure, Dubai, for example, which are supposed to be almost zero crime. If you went there, you look at the local newspaper, you will see that insecurity does happen. So now, we're not going to rest on that. A lot of the problem we have is insecurity in Nigeria, actually intelligence issues. Okay, we can buy equipment and all of that, but if you're not getting intelligence before some of these problems happen, this is what you see. So let's not use insecurity. For me, may not actually be the big issue regarding the growth of the economy. Okay, it's good that President Tinubu has set the 1 trillion target.
Insecurity will affect investment.
If we are going to again, insecurity, but the perception and the narrative around it is the bigger problem.
Are you saying that we shouldn't say that? Are you saying that people? I hear now that people in Buhari are relocating. They are leaving those places. Both businesses and families.
It is the way we spin it and we make it look like our country is going down forever. It's not. If they gave most Nigerians a US visa, they will go. Just 2 weeks ago, they killed the son of a former lawmaker in the same United States. Just blow his head from the back. Where you will be, and you can be in a restaurant or a cinema, and someone walks in and shoots 40, 50 people. Students are not even safe in school. What are you talking about? But they have not spun it in that way. We have to be careful and understand that we have a country to build. This country must survive. And we would, as we go along, we will sort our problems out. Okay? But the way it is being spun now, I get all these things from abroad. Nigeria is dying. What kind of country? I said, look, you also have to look out for yourself where you live. Because in the UK, for example, there's a lot of knife crimes. If you know the number of Nigerians that are caught up in those kind of things. Now, so security is a problem, but it is not the be-all and end-all, and the way it is being spun in Nigeria, we are not helping ourselves. Because, again, I think it comes from the fact that unity needs to be established. A lot of Nigerians see themselves as tribes rather than Nigerians. And so for them, it doesn't matter. If that country disappears, let my tribe be okay. Some people see it as, it's good for Tinubu that this is happening. And they're not going to do anything to play up the right side of some of this information, or to say, let us come together. The insecurity, again, cannot be handled only by the police or the army. Every one of us. For every criminal, every bandit, every kidnapper, they are coming from a certain house where they know that is what they do. Again, with sincerity, with intelligence, a lot of these things will be quelled. Recently in Abuja, and you will see, I can assure you that with the moves that have been made, if you look at it, the way these things came up so radically in Abuja, you'd wonder whether it's a political thing. But, of course, it was a wake-up call to the Minister of FCT and all the other people involved. You see that all of those things will disappear and die down. But let us not wait for that. That shouldn't stop us from being productive as a people. There's so many things to be achieved in this country, so much development, and that's my joy because, at the end of the day, even for those who have traveled abroad and all of that, they have to also understand that this is where growth needs to be achieved. We haven't started, but we're about to start. And you will see, like I said before, in 2024 and going forward, there's going to be a lot of achievements on that front. A lot of things have been done. If you look at even the ministries that...
options.
Yes, we'll come to that. But, if you look at even the ministries that have been created afresh, that means that some of them never existed before. We never had a Ministry of Housing. It was always subsumed under works, right? Now, so that means that if we want, and I'm working on something to let us know that we can achieve that close to double-digit growth GDP that we aim for. So if we capture the activities in the housing sector afresh, if we capture blue economy, if we capture gas alone, okay, that some of these ministries steel, like you said, we never had the Ministry of Steel. But be focused on that steel means probably that we'll be able to achieve something there. Just agglomerate all of those growths in all of those pockets, and you realize that we can post a positive growth and not say, okay, are we going to say because insecurity? There's in Somalia, in Kenya, all of that, there are pirates on the sea as well. Not only in Nigeria, but in Nigeria, we haven't even started to harness even our fisheries, which is part of the blue economy, and which is always a key issue for the World Trade Organization, because countries like ours, developing countries, have been found to not harness their fishery assets as much as the bigger countries in the world. In fact, some of them can take some of our fish and we will not know. And we're importing about $1.5 billion worth of fish every year, especially the one that comes from, is it Norway? The okporoko, and other kind of fish, including tinned fish, including sardines and geisha and all of that get imported into this country. We have it. How much of our fish are we getting? So look, if we look at it, I'm always focused on the positive side of things. Some people, if you say about insecurity, many people, you probably wouldn't leave your house. You'll probably be hiding in the house, but God forbid. So let's go out there. Our country, there's absolutely nothing wrong. And even where we have scenarios where people are undermining the country, let everybody be aware, let everybody be awake, give information to those who need to be given information to. And of course, the president will do the rest.
Okay, just in 1 minute, macro policies. I know you've been talking about it. You've been alluding to some of those policy options. But are there some other tangible ones that we hope to see this year that will let us know that the president really means business? Perhaps even in the area of structural reforms?
Yeah, you can see, okay, just about 2 weeks ago, the Minister of Finance, Coordinating Minister for the Economy, wrote a memo to all the MDAs regarding their internally generated revenues and said, you know what, the old TSA, we're going to draw a line and kind of start afresh because there needs to be more control. For some reason or the other, the government had lost a bit of control under the last administration.
So is it still the same TSA? Because when I saw that, I didn't understand that.
It's the same TSA, but just some sort of in-house cleaning. And they gave a rule and say, for companies that have 100%, that 100% funded by government, 100% of your IGR must come into the Consolidated Revenue Fund, CRF, fully, because they're fully funded. And it is systemized, so meaning that it's technology that will draw the money in. It's not at your discretion. For companies that are 50% funded, 100% of your IGR will come in, but only 50% of, or 50% of your IGR will come in, and 50% of some other statutory money that you get. And for companies that are 100% dependent, reliant on their own, there's also something that the government claws back. I can assure you that we're going to be seeing a whole lot more revenue coming in 2024 than before. And I'm not even talking about the activities of the Presidential Fiscal Policy and Tax Committee, PFPTR, which I'm also a member of. We realize that, look, a whole lot of, let's call it 50% of revenues due to Nigeria get dissipated one way or the other. Some of the revenue, like, for example, in the transport sector, a lot of revenues that should come to the government have been ceded to, if you like, area boys, transport associations, and so on, all over the country. And I'm not talking about federal alone. At that level, it is state. Many of the states need to engage and ensure that they claw some of these things back. And we're also reforming the tax issue to ensure that the multiplicity of taxes are not necessary. If you have a few of them and ensure that you actually are able to claw them back in, what the president actually has in mind, especially in removing subsidy and also the reforms in the FX sector, is actually to create a whole new economy as different from what we've been used before. We're saying bye-bye to the old mediocrity. We believe that we can do a whole lot better with this economy and, of course, all hands on deck, including you mentioned the jackpot phenomenon. For me, I stopped panicking about jackpot phenomenon. As a matter of fact, there are many sectors where there are vacancies in this country. Most nurses, if you study nursing, for example, you can never go hungry in this country. They are looking for engineers almost everywhere, even in government. So this also should inform us. Now, luckily, even medical doctors and nursing, the universities have increased their quota, doubled it, in fact, that look, if the rest of the world is waiting for our doctors, why don't we create more of them and train more of them for them to go? And minding the fact that, that also correlates with remittances, because the moment they go, if they get fairly good jobs abroad, under 6 months, all the money will
But all those remittances will be going for personal, to give grandmother, to give mother.
It also
and it comes
that means he reduces poverty. So it's something. So we don't need to politic about that. It's not going to have any deleterious effect on the growth of this country.
Okay,
it can only make us grow.
Dr. Fasha, we've got to go. But let's quickly take this comment on, we're getting this comment. Please ask your guest how much this administration generated in 2023. How much debt were we able to pay same year? I don't know if it's for talk, but if it's for you to ask, but you should have an idea of these things.
Yeah,
very quickly.
For 2023, the numbers are still going to come out. What's today's day? Well, this 22nd of Exactly.
January.
So if you want that number, you probably talk to the Accountant General of the Federation. We have a dashboard that tells you on a per minute basis how much comes in, how much has come in, and all of that. You know. But you know, I'm more concerned about 2024 going forward. Let's look to the future. There's a great promise for this country in terms of and look at let's look at the budget. 1 second. The budget for 2024. For the first time ever, the capital budget is 9.995 trillion, almost 10 trillion, as against recurrent at 8.7. For the first time, we have more capital than recurrent, non-debt recurrent. You know, and we're talking of 28.7 trillion.
I think we've got to leave it. We will continue another day, Dr. Fashola.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
On that futuristic note and on that optimistic note, thank you very much for coming on the program. I'll be speaking with Dr. Tokwe Fashola, who is the Special Advisor to the President on Economic Affairs. I'll be looking at Nigeria's macroeconomic challenges. Please join me again tomorrow on this station. Same time, I am Nancy Najibi, the best you can be, and be that change that you want to see. Bye now.